Hi everyone. My name is Miss Farah. Welcome to Public Speaking COM1108. This is your first recorded lecture, and in today's lecture, we'll be talking about audience analysis. Before we start with our lecture, I just want to remind you guys again on your assessments because that's the most important thing, right? So these are the things that will be contributing to your grade, to your CGPA, if you can say it. So for COM 1108, we have two different tests. So for the first test, which will be in week 4, as you can see here, it's 15% for both test 1 and test 2. And I have given you a proposed date. So for test 1 and test 2, both will be done in online. So it's an open book test, but because it's an open book test, it's not going to be very easy. So I shall be talking more about the test before we go for the test. But what I want to highlight here is that I also have written down here the proposed date. So please make sure that you guys are available during these dates because you need strong internet connection because you would need to do these tests online. Okay, so test will be only 1 hour, 10 to 11, and all of these assessments all will be done on Friday. Okay, so test 1 and test 2, it's only 1 hour. Week 4 and week 6, please make sure that you guys are available during these times and also have very good internet connection. Again, if you have any trouble and any problem, trying to access the internet or even having some, difficulty into getting a laptop or even some devices to do the test, please inform me in advance, earlier in advance, so that I can, consider and giving you guys a different alternative for your test. All right. So for this course, we have 3 different presentations. So first presentation and second presentation will be individual. These 2 presentations will be done in week 3 and also week 5. So the first presentation, because that will be your first presentation for this course, it's going to be slightly easy in a way that you only have to do your presentation up until um, the 3 minutes. So it's between 1 to 3 minutes. The topic will be free topic. You can basically talk about anything that you want for this presentation. And this hopefully will be done during a live stream class in a way that I will be giving you guys a link to a Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. And during this live stream, class, you guys will be or have to present in front of your friends. It's like a video conference with everybody listening to your topic. Okay, so that will be it for your first presentation. Second presentation will be in week 5. Now, because this will be the second presentation, it will be slightly harder in a way that you guys have 3 to 5 minutes to talk about either you want to inform people or you want to persuade people. Okay, and lastly would be a group presentation. I think some of you guys are classmates and you guys have known each other for, before. So you might want to think about if you have friends or you have known some friends and you want to be in the same group. So I want to let you guys think about who you want to be grouped with. Okay. So I shall be talking more about group presentation throughout the semester. It's going to be a long, well, it's only week 1. Okay, so chill. And lastly, we have a reflective essay, and that is only 10%, and that one is due in week 7 on Sunday. So in week 7, you have a lot of things, I guess. Not only this course, you have a different course as well. So for your presentation 3, that one will be due in on Friday, whereas your reflective essay, which is an individual, will due on a Sunday. Okay, so altogether, this is 100% coursework. By all means, no final exam. That's good. But because there is no final exam, obviously the downside of it is that you guys will be very busy throughout the semester try to, complete all of these assessments. Okay. Now let's talk about audience analysis. As you can see, I'm a bit tired. The reason why is because just now I have recorded 1 hour plus of this thing, but I forgot to record it. I'm so stupid. So my momentum is low, but I'm gonna try and do this. Okay, now let's talk about audience analysis now. So, one of the few things that I often highlight or I often ask my students when they enroll in a public speaking course is that I always ask them, to you as a speaker, what is the most important aspect that you want to consider when giving out a speech? Okay, now literally everybody can say anything, yeah, but to me personally, as a speaker or even as a person, as a teacher, okay, because I have to teach, and I have to teach students. So to me, the most important thing that I always remind myself and consider before teaching or even giving a speech are the person who are listening to my speech, or the audience. Okay, so at the end of today's lesson, hopefully I will be able to convince you guys on why is it important for you to consider your audience when you are giving a speech. Okay, so when giving a speech, you have to understand the psychology for behind knowing your audience. So knowing your audience is important because these people will be listening to your speech, and as you talk, as you give your speech, at the back of their mind they will be judging every single detail that you said. Okay, now when a speaker is talking, what goes in the audience head is that is something that we call a frame of reference. Frame of reference is basically meaning that the audience have their own needs, their own interests, and also expectations, or even knowledge, or even experience based on a topic that you said. So, for example, if you want to give a speech about ghost experience, like paranormal activity. Now, each one of us, as the audience, would have different beliefs. Some of us might, don't believe in ghosts at all. Some of us, perhaps have their personal experience, which is why they sort of like believe in ghosts. So each one of your audience would have different opinions and different beliefs, and it's important for you to be able to cater to all of these things. Okay, basically your audience will hear what they want to hear about things that are pretty much meaningful for them because they are human beings, and this is something that we call as egocentric. So, egocentrism is basically the tendency of people to be concerned above all with their own personal values, beliefs, and well being. Now, I want to show you guys a very simple experiment. I want you guys to pause this video and go and find a picture of yourself. Sorry, a group picture of yourself. So, it could be in your phone. You can go ahead and find, like a picture, group picture of you on Instagram, maybe if you have taken, group photos with your friend. Now, here I have a Polaroid photo, sorry, of 4 people, and one of these people is me. So when you first look at a group photo, the first the first face, if you can say it, the first person that you shall be looking at is actually yourself, you. Why? So this is something that I think psychologists call it as egocentrism. It's pretty much normal for you to go and find your face and sort of like zoom into it and to see if you're looking good. It's completely normal to feel this way because this is a phenomenon that we call as egocentrism, where you try to, you know, concentrate on yourself, because you are you. Okay, so this the tendency of people to be concerned about their own belief, their own faith, their own well-being and values above other people. Okay, what does it mean? It means that the person who are listening to your speech will judge you based on what you say, based on what they know and what they believe. And your task as a speaker is to make sure that your speech can be relatable to them as the listener and making them believe and convince why they should care and even listen to you at all. Okay. So, at the end of today's lesson, hopefully you will be able to understand why audience analysis is important. Number two, try to establish a common ground with your audience. Think about situational characteristics. We're going to talk about audience demography. And lastly, we shall be talking about the three audience dispositions. Okay? So, talking about audience centeredness is basically trying to keep in mind for you as a speaker, think about the most important person when giving a speech is actually your audience. And keeping in mind that audience is, keeping your audience foremost during a speech preparation and even during your presentation itself. So, basically, some of the questions that you might want to ask yourself as a speaker is that the first one, who actually am I speaking to? Number two, what do I want them to know, believe, or do by giving this speech? And lastly, what is the most effective way of trying to accomplish those aims by thinking about them as the listener? So when you do this, you basically try to tailor your message, tailor your speech to your audience. Okay, so what you actually doing are very, very good because you try to make your audience to be much more interested with your speech. Not only that, you try to improve your credibility as a speaker. And lastly, you try to have a more receptive audience. What does it mean by a more receptive audience? Is actually, so at the end of every speech, a very good speaker will be able to have audience who would eventually close with an action. So you would have like a very observable outcome that you want your audience to show or audience to have. So a very good speaker will be able to close their speech with an action. So these are the people who would have receptive audience. So very positive outcomes coming from this. So very good example of a good speaker, yeah. So how would you try to tailor your speech to your audience? By finding a common ground with your audience. How do you do that? By looking at values, by looking at beliefs and even experiences that you think would have the same thing, the same experience, the same beliefs and even the same values between you as a speaker and also your audience. So, to establish common ground, a speaker has to consider situational characteristics. So, what are situational characteristics? Situational characteristics are factors in a specific speech setting that you want to observe before you give the speech. And there are four different types. First one would be audience size. So, audience size here is referring to the number of people who are listening to your speech. Number two, we're looking at the location or the room of your speech. Third is time, and lastly, mobility. So when we think about audience size, obviously it's not the size, the body of your audience. We're looking at the number of people who are listening to your speech. Sorry. So the rule of thumb, it's basically the larger the number of people or the larger the number of audience size, the more formal your presentation should be. Why? Because if you have more people, you have to remember you have more, you have to cater to people from different more people from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different beliefs, different values, and things like that. So the best way for you to avoid conflict is actually try to make your speech a bit more formal, so that you won't, you won't offend one audience trying to actually cater to another audience. So the best way is actually to make it a bit more formal. Third, when we think about audience size, it's important because that will eventually affect on the choice of language and even your visual aid. So these are some of the examples here. So if you can see here, we have a presenter here. So this presenter is, she's trying to give a presentation to a slightly smaller group of people. So as you can see here, when presenting to a smaller number of people, definitely your language could be a bit more relaxed. And not only that, you can think about some activities that you can do with your audience, because you don't have a lot of people to focus on. So you can eventually have like a one-to-one session which with each one of them. So it's a bit more hands-on activities that you can do with them. Not only that, you can even you can think about uh, how to reach out and how to maintain their attention as well. So definitely having a smaller group would have some advantage, but at the same time, when you have smaller group of people, you have to remember that it could be a bit intimidating as well, especially if these, group of people are new and you don't know them and they don't know each other. That can try to, you try to be in their personal space, that could be slightly intimidating for them as well. Okay. Next is here. As you can see here, there is a boy trying to present in front of his classmates, I guess. So as you can see here, this could be an intimidating experience as well, because as you can see, even the the mobility, or their classmates is only looking in front of them. It's not like here in this picture, as you can see, it's a bit more circle, yeah, as compared to this. And the anxiety of presenting in a larger group of people are also different when you're presenting to a smaller group of people. Not only that, it's also a bit more intimidating because you have a teacher who's sort of like listening very careful to your presentation as well. So these are some of the things that you might want to consider when thinking about, giving a speech. And lastly, here, it's very interesting because now that we are in MCO, we don't have face-to-face interaction, and very often we have to, present in online or virtual classroom. So I want you guys to be thinking about this, because interestingly, this is something that will happen to you guys for your presentation 1 and presentation 2, because you guys have to present to your classmates, and thinking about what could be some of the ways to maintain your classmates' attention when listening to you virtually. What could be some of your tricks or skills for you to maintain your audience attention? So think about it, because you guys will be doing it in your presentation. All right, I want to talk about physical setting now. Basically, physical setting is just a fancy word to refer to the room or location during your speech. This is also important because that would eventually affect on a lot of things. For example, if you have a smaller room, it would be different than working with a larger room. Because if you have a big room but your audience is too little, that would affect on your acoustics as well. Not only that, the physical setting or the location would be different when you have like an auditorium where you would have all of the access to the uh, microphone and also the PA system. Obviously, when you're presenting to a larger number of people, you might want to request for a microphone, so that you can be your presentation can be a bit more clearer to them, and you might want to think about preparing some PowerPoint slides, because and that would retain their attention to your speech as well. So those are the things that you have to consider. The temperature, is it going to be an air conditioning room or not? Is it going to be too hot? The seating of the room, just now we look at how your audience will be seated in front of you, or like in a circle. The size of the room, big or small. Technology, is it going to have like a PA system to it? And obviously your voice projection will be affected by the acoustic of the location itself. Next, we're looking at time. Now, when we talk about time, there are two things that you have to remember here. First one is referring to the time allocation for you to do your speech. Now, just now I talked about presentation one, where you have 1 to 3 minutes. So it's going to be very short. Think about what are some necessary information that you want to talk about, or maybe there are some details that you might want to omit. You might not want to talk about it at all because you don't have enough time for it. Okay? Um, or think about if you have if you were giving a chance or opportunity to present to a group of people in a longer time, for example, giving a lecture for 2 hours, you might want to think about, doing a bit more hands-on activities or maybe some games, because you want to keep your audience entertained throughout the presentation itself. Okay, so that is on time allocated for your speech. Now, secondly, is actually the time you have to consider the body clock of your audience. Now, what does it mean by body clock of your audience? It's referring to their readiness to hear your speech. Now, you have to consider, is it too morning for them? For example, 8 in the morning is too morning for some people. Or are they going to be very sleepy because your presentation will take place after lunch, or maybe they'll be too hungry because they didn't eat their breakfast and they're waiting for their lunchtime. So those are some of the important things when it comes to time to be considered when doing presentation. Lastly, we're looking at mobility. Now, when we talk about mobility, it's often linked back to the location or the room that you chose when you're giving the speech. Okay, so we're looking into how your audience are being positioned or seated during a speech. Now, there are two types here. The first one is stationary, where your audience could not move a lot during a speech because their place is basically fixed. Or secondly, we can have like a bit like a mobile audience where they can freely roam around the room and be in different places at the same time all around basically the room. So an example of this is in the library's interactive room, which I shall be giving you guys some pictures in a bit, or even in a poster presentation where you can have people come and go in front of you. All right, so I want to give you guys some examples of, here is basically stationary. Okay, stationary audience. As you can see, this is a picture of me teaching, and these are my kids. Obviously they took a selfie when I was teaching. So if you can see here, the classroom is pretty much fixed. So we have a fixed table with some chairs. So when having such location, you have to remember that the activities that you might want to do with your audience is pretty much limited because they are fixed in that position. Try to compare with this interactive room here that we have in the library. Sometimes I would invite my students to do classes here because I don't really like the position here because I cannot do a lot of things here. So if we look into the interactive room here, as you can see, there are bin bags where students can just simply take it and sit everywhere around the room and try to make themselves very comfortable. So obviously the activities that you can do in this room would be very much different to what you can do in here in a normal classroom. Okay, so this is referring to a bit more mobile audience. Now, this is an example of a poster presentation very often in a conference where you can have, people come and go looking at your posters, and sometimes they would, stop in front of your poster and asking you guys some questions for clarifications. So one of the things that you have to consider when having such poster presentation is that, some of the audience can simply leave and go. So it's not like the uh, they have they have the right to actually leave from your presentation. So you would have only a certain amount of time to retain their attention. Okay, now we want to talk about audience analysis, in particular to their disposition towards the topic, towards you as a speaker, and also towards occasion. When we talk about their disposition towards the topic, we're looking at their interest. Are they interested to listen to your topic? Is the audience engaged or distracted, motivated or not when you talk about this topic? Think about their knowledge. Are they fully aware, and are they knowledgeable around this topic? Should you use some jargon or technical language when you're explaining about the topic? Should you change your language to make it a bit more simple, or change the material because they don't know the topic? And also try to look at the attitude. uh, if you were to present this topic, would they know it? Would they oppose it? Would they like the topic? So, attitude is a frame of mind in favor or sometimes opposing to someone's a person, a policy, a belief, or even an institution. So we also have a disposition, audience disposition towards the speaker, you as a speaker. So basically, try to look into understanding your audience response towards your speech by looking at your credibility in doing a speech about that topic. They will be judging how competent or not you are as a speaker, and try to accept the topic based on your presentation. So they are more likely to have a positive response if they believe that you are credible as a speaker to talk about the topic itself. Okay. Lastly, we have disposition towards an occasion. So sometimes we would have different occasions. Sorry, we would have to present or give a speech for different occasions. You're invited to give a speech to your friend's wedding or even birthday parties. Sometimes you would have a occasion where you are selected as the valedictorian, and you were given the honor to give a speech during graduation day. But do not ruin the occasion by inserting your personal or even political agenda during that occasion. Would it be wise for you to talk about politics when you are giving a speech as the valedictorian? So those are the things that people will consider when they listen to your speech. Now we shall be talking about demographic audience or analysis. So demographic is basically referring to age, gender, religion, sexual orientation, group membership, racial, ethnicity, and even cultural background. So basically, it's trying to identify your audience demographic features by thinking that these are very, very important factors when you want to choose the topic, or choose or tailoring to your speech itself. The best way, as I mentioned, is try to emphasize on common values, goals, and also experiences. This is something that we call as identification. So when thinking about demographic, you can think about the age, gender, and sexual orientation. So this is a very good example of a food nutritionist called Mika Nakamura. So basically, Mika, what she did is that she has the same objective of try to make a good food choices. And what's interesting is that Mika has different approach to different target audience. So her first target audience are school children, whereas her second target audience are parents, and lastly she has older adults. So for school children, her approach is a bit more hands-on activities because children don't have a longer attention span, obviously. So she wants to do a bit more hands-on activities so that the students will be entertained and stay engaged. So she would prepare a simple nutritionist shake or even a simple meal with the children. But when giving a speech to parents, she can give a speech, obviously, and she would try to tailor her sort of like speech by giving a topic, trying to prepare healthy food quickly and easily. Why quickly and easily? Because obviously parents are very busy, they need to make money and stuff like that. So the topic that Mika chooses is a bit more like applicable to these parents. Whereas when try to give a speech to older adults, these adults have more knowledge about preparing food, and maybe Mika wants to try and tailor her speech by concentrating on a bit more complicated techniques. Having said that, these adults probably would have the basic knowledge about some techniques in cooking, and also she can tailor her speech having into having a more good and healthy aging food. Okay, try as a tips into try to cater to older adults maybe. Some of other audience analysis, demographic audience analysis could be thinking about one's racial, ethnic, and also cultural background. Think about religion, think about that person's or your audience group membership. An example would be if you are trying to present to a group of maybe like an older people on some pop culture like Justin Bieber or even BTS maybe. So maybe this audience when you are try when you are adapting your knowledge on audience analysis, you perhaps wouldn't choose such thing for older generation because they wouldn't know about Justin Bieber, they wouldn't even know about BTS. So thinking about audience analysis demographic is very, very important in order to make sure that they understand what you're talking about. But even so, you have to be very, very careful of not doing stereotyping. So what is basically stereotyping is when you try to create an overgeneralization of an image of a group of people. So basically you assume that everybody in that particular race or in that particular age group are basically the same people or would have the same tendency of doing some things. For example, you will say like all Asians are good in math and all girls are really bad in sports. You can say that all men who spend a lot of time on computers are geeks. So these are some of the examples of stereotypes that people often do. As you can see here, some stereotypes are positive, but some stereotypes no, most stereotypes are negatives. So you need to find the right balance between, thinking about this demographic and what could be their potential respond to it, and also try to balance it out by not, you know, doing stereotyping because not everyone is the same. So creating the balance between these two are also important. Okay. So let's have a look at different situations now. So first one, we have Ben here in an interview. I want you to pause this video and have a read into this situation and tell me what is the main mistake that Ben did during his interview. Can you pause this video and think about what happened to Ben? So, here in an interview, Ben said that my aim would be making sure that physicians are thoroughly informed about the benefits of our product. Doctors will have the information he needs to make sure that his patient get the best medications available. This will be an honor to work with this company, to know that I am making a small contribution to helping doctors to do the best that he can for his patient. So I think that Ben did an incredible job trying to convince that he should get this job. But the main problem of Ben here, what? The main problem is that he's not gender sensitive. He assumed that all doctors are men because, and the pronoun that he used to describe doctors are mostly men. He, his, he, his. So if you have a panel of interviewee who are women or even feminists like me, they wouldn't be happy, hearing Ben's answers during this interview. Okay? Now, secondly, we have Russell here. He said that most of our work will be on Saturdays. We might work in the evening, maybe on Sunday afternoon. But don't worry, we won't work on Sunday morning because that's when everyone will be at church. So, what's the issue here? The issue here is that Russell is not religion sensitive. Russell assumed that everyone, will be, going to church on Sunday morning. Maybe not everybody in the whole group are Christian, or maybe some of them don't even go to church on Sunday morning. So Russell here is not religion sensitive because Russell does not consider some other, religion people. Okay, so when you want to think about try to alter your speech according to your audience. Try to tailor your speech according to your audience. Really, there are two ways of doing it. The first one is before you go and give your speech, try to adapt your topic or speech before you actually eventually go and execute it. So first one is try to assess on how your audience would respond to the speech, and also try to adjust the speech in order to make it a bit more clearer and a bit more convincing. And how you do it is by trying to imagine what would be their response to each one of these things. Okay? Secondly, you can still alter and adapt your speech during the speech itself. So it can take a bit more skill to do this, but I'm pretty sure some of you guys will be able to do this. Basically, try to adjust to some unexpected circumstances. Just now, you prepare some uh, sort of like expected what they would respond to when you are giving this speech, but sometimes you plan it but it doesn't go that way. You can actually still try to adjust your speech when you are presenting. And secondly is try to observe your audience responses and look at their feedback. Pause, think about what could be the best way of you try to alter, to this speak. Sorry. So we have a situation here. Sharon wants to persuade her classmates to vote for for the member of students' body government. What should she do to get her classmates to be interested? So for this case, obviously, Sharon wants to consider talking about some issues on the campus because they're mainly focusing on student body government. Think about what are some of the issues on the campus that Sharon would want to highlight on, and how these committee members can be the voice that can help them to solve their problems. Sharon also want to consider on demonstrating the voting procedures. Why? Because maybe some of her classmates do not have the content knowledge, do not have the prior knowledge of voting, and they don't know the voting procedures. So you might want to consider. Sharon wants to consider to actually think about, giving a speech on this. Next, you are halfway through your presentation on important concept of economic presentation, but your audience looks so confused. So how would you do this? So first, when you have a very confused audience, you have to pause. And if you can, try to ask your audience if they understand what you have said. So a very good way of doing this is actually using a technique called body pull. You might wanna, if you don't wanna if you don't wanna make them offended, so you might wanna say, everybody, close your eyes. Hands up if you understand what I've said just now. How many of you have questions? How many of you understand the concept that I mentioned earlier? So when you ask them to close their eyes, obviously they wouldn't know. I mean, other people wouldn't know if they understand or not. So you try to keep their self-esteem going as well at the same time. Or if they don't mind asking it, so you can just ask them, do you have any question on this? Am I making myself clear on the concept? Do you need me to explain one more time? Okay, but the problem is that when it comes to Malaysian kids, they don't, they immediately say yes. That's our problem. Okay, so secondly, you might want to try to repeat the idea again, but this time try to make it a bit more slower, because sometimes when you talk, maybe it's the pace, it's too fast. You might want to slow things down a bit. Thirdly, try to explain in a different manner. At this time, you might want to use a simpler examples. Or if it helps, you might want to take the marker pens and use the whiteboard to draw some diagrams. Or if you have a laptop, you want to use your PowerPoints to make it easier, and use the charts and diagrams and pictures to make it easier for your audience to understand your topic. Okay? Now, here we have a situation where you decide to give an informative speech about how earthquakes happen. 90% of your audience do not have any information about geology. So, what would you do? So, for this situation here, you need to remember that you have to present at the basic and foundation level in a way that it has to be very basic, and you have to avoid using jargon or scientific language. Instead, try to use more pictures, try to use more visual information so that it can help them to understand better. And you can also try to consider to practice your speech to your friend or someone who doesn't know about the topic or geology in this example here, so that they can give you feedback, and you can ask them like, which part do you think that I should stress more, which part that you can understand, which part that you don't understand. So those feedback can be very, very helpful if your friend do not have the prior knowledge just like your audience. Okay, so what did you guys learn in today's video? I hope that at the end of this video that you guys now know that audience analysis is a very, very important factor before you try to go and give a speech. So when you want to think about audience analysis and you want to tailor your speech to your audience, you need to find a common ground between you as a speaker and also your audience, so that you can reach out to your audience better. You also need to remember that situational analysis is very, very important. Not only that, knowing your audience disposition towards the topic, towards you as a speaker, and also towards the occasion are very, very important. Lastly, think about the demographic of your audience, but do not stereotype. Okay, so that is basically the main things about our lesson today. If you don't understand, you can email me, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.